We had a lot of travels through rural Zimbabwe where we would travel for hours on end and find a borrower who was a tomato farmer and took out a loan for an irrigation system. And I would show her the list of lenders who I would show her literally 100 people who had supported her loan for that irrigation system. And they came from all around the world. They were from Belgium and Canada and Brazil. And her eyes would well up, and she just couldn't believe that total strangers invested in her business and took a chance on her.
Welcome to episode 45 of People Are the Answer. I truly believe that people are the only answer to the world's many problems. I'm Jeffrey M. Zucker, a serial entrepreneur, here to learn how innovators are creating outsized, transformational social impact. Today's episode features Tess Murphy, Director of Program for Managed Lending at Kiva.org, a mission-driven technology nonprofit that offers crowd-funded microloans to serve the financially excluded. I didn't know a ton about Kiva going into the call, and I'm really impressed by what they're doing and how easy they make it for everyday consumers to create true impact in the world. Tess and I discuss how her years abroad influenced her desire to create impact, being a Kiva Boomerang, the incredible impact that can come from loans as low as $400 and from an individual lending as little as $25, why Kiva gift cards are the best gift cards, and much more. Here is Tess Murphy on People Are the Answer. Tess, thank you so much for joining me on People Are the Answer.
Thanks for having me. I'm excited to be here.
Yeah, I'm excited to learn more about you and your work. And if you could just start off by telling our listeners, who you are, where you're based, and what your current role is.
Yeah, so my name is Tess Murphy. I am based in Brooklyn, New York. I work for an organization called Kiva.org. Kiva is a global nonprofit microfinance company. So we created a lending platform where really anyone can go on to lend as little as $25 to an entrepreneur or individual and invest in their business or their livelihood. And my role there, I'm the director of program for a program called Managed Lending. So essentially, I help corporations and foundations lend their money to individuals, businesses, entrepreneurs, enterprises at scale. And I collaborate with them on these programs through using products and services or marketing campaigns, and basically help them achieve the impact that they want to achieve in the world.
That's awesome. Yeah, thank you so much for sharing that. And excited to learn more. Kiva sounds like a really amazing organization. And in general, though, in life and in your career, what would you say motivates you?
I'm really motivated by the idea of individual actions that can lead to systemic change at scale. So how that can take effect kind of varies based off of different organizations and what they provide individuals the opportunity to do. But mainly for myself and my career, I've been really interested in how technology can be leveraged at a micro scale. So helping give technology to groups of people that will allow them to make changes and, again, see the impact that they want in the world and to affect change both in their backyard and on a global scale.
Got it. It sounds like a great motivator. And where did you grow up and what was it like there?
I grew up in San Francisco, California, actually before the Silicon Valley gold rush that we now know San Francisco to be affiliated with. And my parents made the decision essentially to raise their kids within the city rather than move outside of it. They wanted us to be exposed to a lot of different lifestyles, be immersed in a variety of different cultures, and understand, kind of have that global mindset and really understand different groups of people and how different people live and have a variety of different viewpoints.
Yeah, that makes total sense. And I certainly think living in a city can give you sort of a different worldview than you might otherwise have in a suburb or something like that. What was that like for you as a kid? Did you even realize it was different than what a lot of other people were experiencing?
No, I don't think I realized it as a kid. A lot of the things we did growing up, I thought were normal to everyone. So, for example, I would take three city buses to get to school, and I would cross through a variety of different neighborhoods throughout the city. My high school I went to a Jesuit high school, and our kind of motto was enter to learn, leave to serve. And the whole idea behind that was not only to give back within your community, but to really understand the concept of shared liberation and mutual reciprocity so that it's not just me giving charity or aid to someone. It's the idea of, again, shared liberation, that if people are living in poverty at the school next to you, it is within your benefit to alleviate that suffering, because when people live in poverty or they're affected by systemic racism, that impacts all of us negatively. It's not just that group of people in an isolated bubble. And I think going to a school like that really reinforced that notion, was really pivotal to the decisions I made in my career and what I pursued later on.
Yeah, it sounds like a really valuable experience. And I imagine that you have very thoughtful parents.
It depends if they're going to listen to this or not. Um, no, I'm joking. Yes, they were very thoughtful. I mean, my mom grew up in California, my dad grew up in Boston, but from a young age, they really prioritized traveling. So we, took an RV across the country when I was 10 with 4 kids. We lived in an RV for a month. We, did backpacking. We did a lot of travel on a budget, but we were also very fortunate, obviously, to even have that opportunity to do so. But they really prioritized it because they wanted, again, us to have that global mindset and to understand just how different people live around the world.
That's awesome to hear. And you mentioned sort of growing up kind of pre the big Silicon Valley blow up, but did being in San Francisco get you interested in tech in the first place or not?
Yeah, that's a great question. I imagine it probably did. Again, I don't think we really realized the environment we were in the time that it was all happening. But certainly, San Francisco was the birthplace of a lot of technology and of that technology growth mindset. And so I think by nature, you're exposed to that industry more than other industries. Now that I live in New York, I can see very clearly how saturated technology is in the Bay Area versus in New York. There's a lot more diversity of careers and backgrounds and livelihoods. So yeah, I think growing up in San Francisco and then again returning to San Francisco after college, it just seemed like a natural step to pursue a career or a job in the technology space.
And I saw that you went across the country to Fordham for college. And what led you there, and how was that experience?
I did go to Fordham. I wanted to get out of California for my undergraduate degree and really see another part of the country and understand what life was like outside of California and outside of the San Francisco bubble. So I chose Fordham because I wanted to live in New York City and experience that for myself. It was a really formative experience. Fordham is in the Bronx, and it's both a bubble, it's an enclosed campus, and it's in the middle of the most metropolitan international city in the country. So it has this kind of clashing of cultures. And I studied political science and French there with an emphasis on international development. So I was, very interested in pursuing a career in international development through Fordham, which was, again, a great place to do that, with the UN being in Manhattan and on a lot of international development NGOs based in New York City as well.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And it sounds like it was a great place to be. And then I imagine those international desires led you on your path after school where you traveled the world.
Yeah. So first at Fordham, I did a program called Global Outreach that provided the opportunity to go to Peru through a service trip. It was my first time traveling to the Global South and seeing how different parts of the Global South live, especially those parts that are in poverty due to the effects the the negative effects of capitalism upon those countries. And it was very eye-opening to understanding the role that international development has in these areas and what is positive about it and what may not actually be as effective when it comes to charity and aid organizations. They all play a unique role in certain places, but in others, I think there's a lot of questioning or discussion happening around what the role of aid is long term and if it is really affecting systemic change in those areas. So I came back from that time in Peru, and like a lot of millennials probably had a little bit of an identity crisis, trying to understand what my next step would be after graduating. And I moved home and waitressed. I worked 3 jobs to save as much money as I could and decided to backpack, which is now such a popular thing. But at the time, I won't tell you how old I am, but it was pre-Instagram. So it was not popular to just take off to Asia and backpack. It was not like a known thing. It was very confusing for people. But I wanted to, I think, buy time to figure out what I had this track of working in international development, working for an NGO my whole life. And then it was kind of jolted. So I wanted to buy time to really think through what excited me, what motivated me, and what my next career step should be. So I told my parents I was going to be gone for 3 months, and I booked a one-way flight to China. And I didn't return for 2 years. So much to their dismay, I set out basically with a very open mindset to see not only of all the money I saved, how far it could get me, but what I could do along the way, what kind of jobs I could find. And I also wrote about it. So I did keep a travel blog. It's a little cringe to read now, I won't lie, but a lot of what I did in that blog was exploring the communities that I was living in and understanding, how entrepreneurs, vendors, small businesses are upholding and lifting up those communities and really being these like cultural focal points for the communities I lived in. And so I spent 2 years essentially finding odd job to odd job, a little bit of a vagabond, but I worked at a resort, I worked at a hostel, I taught English at a monastery in Myanmar. I, waitressed, I taught English in Thailand, like you name an odd job, I probably did it on that trip.
I mean, it sounds like you got some tremendous life experience, and I can certainly relate to like looking at old things I've written and being like, oh, geez. But I can imagine that you learned an incredible amount within those 2 years.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think I won't go into a long discussion on cancel culture, but we don't give a lot of room for people to evolve and grow and be dynamic individuals. I think we all, our perspectives and our worldview is constantly changing. But yeah, I leveraged that blog for a lot of future job opportunities because it was really a reflection of entrepreneurship of these local communities. And it was my way to kind of process what I was seeing firsthand and really try to understand it through writing.
So you had these incredible experiences, over 2 years abroad. And how would you say that those experiences impacted the next steps of your life and, continue to impact you today?
The trip I took abroad, there was a very distinct moment when I was working at a resort actually, and trying to decide what I should do next. And I was explaining to someone there about the blog I had written, about my curiosity about entrepreneurship, small businesses, how they lift up communities and really are kind of holding the culture of those areas. And they suggested a company called Kiva to me that was based in San Francisco. And that was the first time I had heard about where I work now. And I became really fascinated by this organization. And when I returned home, I applied for their internship program and got a job as an intern on the marketing team, where I wrote blogs and, managed the email send to the lenders through Kiva. So the lenders are people like you and me who just go on the platform, find borrowers, and support their businesses. So through that, I learned a lot about storytelling and how to lift up people's stories to inspire and motivate people to take action. So I would say that travel experience, not only the writing, but just the lens that I was looking at it through, really, and quite literally hearing about Kiva through that trip really paved the way for a lot of my career decisions that would come.
Got it. Wow. So it really did lead you where you are today. And it's really cool to hear that. And I'm really glad you got to have that experience and then bring your talents to Kiva. And I know you spent time initially as an intern and in a fellowship role. And then you left for a little while.
Yeah, I was recommended to the fellowship program from my current boss, and I was a storytelling fellow through Kiva. So the Kiva fellowship program sends fellows into the countries that they have borrowers and lending partners in. So we work in over 83 countries around the world, and the fellows work directly with our partner organizations called lending partners. These are microfinance institutions, NGOs, social enterprises. Those organizations are responsible for finding borrowers and entrepreneurs who might need a loan and then posting that loan on the Kiva platform. So they're really critical to expanding Kiva's impact and reach. And as a fellow, I worked in Zimbabwe and South Africa through 4 of our lending partners. A big part of my role there was to interview borrowers and hear their story, hear about their business, and assess the impact of the loan on their lives. And as you can imagine, it was an incredibly formative experience. It really showed me not only the impact of access to finance on people's lives and the kind of opportunity that opens up for them when they can access the finance they need to succeed. It also really showed the impact of technology on its ability to connect people in the farthest reaches of the world, connect people around the world to make a difference, and even the farthest reaches. So we had a lot of travels through rural Zimbabwe where we would travel for hours on end and find a borrower who was a tomato farmer and took out a loan for an irrigation system. And I would show her the list of lenders who I would show her literally 100 people who had supported her loan for that irrigation system. And they came from all around the world. They were from Belgium and Canada and Brazil. And her eyes would well up, and she just couldn't believe that total strangers invested in her business and took a chance on her. And it was moments like that that really, again, showed the power of technology and its ability to bring people around the world and access people in the farthest corners of the world and help invest in their businesses. So that experience really, as you can imagine, left a mark on me. And I knew I wanted to continue down that road of technology, that theme of technology connecting people. So I went, my boss from Kiva at the time went to join this nonprofit called wishbone.org, which was a nonprofit that similarly did crowdfunding, but their mission was to send underprivileged kids to after-school programs. So a lot of studies have shown that kids who go to summer camp and have after-school programs are more likely to get into the universities of their choice or to go on and graduate with a four-year degree. So Wishbone's mission was to help kids who don't have access to that kind of finance do that. So I worked with that boss to do marketing for that nonprofit.
Sounds like a really cool organization. And I know that after that you ended up at Indiegogo. What led you there?
I unintentionally have a crowdfunding theme in my career.
Seems that way, yeah.
Which is I don't know what it's like, the chicken or the egg, what came first. I think it's
Right.
crowdfunding at the time was just this revolutionary idea. There's like Kickstarter and Indiegogo, and Kiva was actually the first crowdfunding company even before Indiegogo and Kickstarter, but it's like democratizing access to finance that really got me excited. And I just kept following those breadcrumbs and following that inspiration. And I actually had a old coworker from my intern class at Kiva who worked at Indiegogo and recommended me for a role there. So I ended up working at Indiegogo for almost 3 years. I started in customer support and really just worked my way up through the organization. So I managed first their social media channels. And for anyone listening who isn't familiar with Indiegogo, they specialize in crowdfunding for hardware entrepreneurs. So entrepreneurs who have a physical product that they want to bring to life. They have an idea. They want to figure out how to manufacture it, produce it, ship it, market it. And Indiegogo kind of supports with different services and partnerships every step along the way. And so by the time I was getting ready to leave Indiegogo, I was helping with their partnership program, those services like Brookstone, Amazon, other manufacturing companies that worked with these entrepreneurs to help bring their ideas to life. And I was kind of helping oversee parts of that program.
Got it. That sounds really interesting. And you spent 3 years there. And, what were your major takeaways from that experience?
I've spoken to a few people who are earlier in their career who have asked, how did I get to where I am today, and how did I kind of build this career for myself? And the honest answer I give is follow what you're passionate about and be willing to work your way up. And so starting at Indiegogo, in the customer support role, when I really wanted to do marketing, and I really wanted to do marketing for social impact specifically, at first it didn't really feel super aligned with what I was interested in doing. But it gave me a lot of foundational skills and understanding of how different elements of the business work that I think were critical to getting me to where I was today. I think the impulse to skip ahead 8 steps into your dream job right away is not always feasible. So that experience taught me a lot. And then the other thing is crowdfunding creates a lot of wild products. So these entrepreneurs would send every day we'd receive different products to our office. And it was a very kind of cliche Silicon Valley episode where there would be drones flying around the office and people would be riding those suitcases that are motorized.
Yeah.
So they would do motorized suitcase races around the office. And looking back, it was 2016, like in the middle of the Silicon Valley rush.com boom. And it really was kind of the cliche quintessential Silicon Valley tech company with everything going on in the offices.
That must have been a cool experience, and it's funny to hear about those motorized suitcases. I've seen those before, and then I actually read an article this week about a motorized office chair that's coming out. So it's funny to see some of the things that come out of that world.
Even better for races, those motorized office chairs.
Exactly, they were talking about in the article that would have races around the office. I also want to point out, I really liked what you said about not sort of hastily jumping into your dream job. I think a lot of people, might try to do that. And if they end up in the job, they might realize they're not ready for it. And who knows if they'll get another opportunity.
Exactly. I think a lot of even work like waitressing, for example, taught me so many life skills for the role I have now. And every role or every job that you have just makes you a more dynamic person who can understand different situations and build empathy and build adaptability and resilience. I used a lot of that too when I was interviewing after backpacking for 2 years without any job experience. It was really daunting, but there's a lot of core skill sets from any experience that you can take out and derive and be able to communicate about why you can do the role that you're entering.
Yeah, no, that's really great to hear. And I agree in terms of, the other experiences really lending themselves to your future goals. And, having worked in the service industry myself, I certainly think it's incredibly valuable for people to spend some time there. before they move on to, whatever else they may be looking at.
Yeah, definitely.
So you spent, almost 3 years at Indiegogo, and then you came back to Kiva, where you've been for almost 5 years. Did you always sort of stay in touch with Kiva, or what brought you back there?
Yes, I'm known as a Kiva Boomerang. So the intern or fellow who goes out into the world and boomerangs back to the organization after trying different things. After my fellowship experience, I just knew that I had to work for this organization again one day. It was such an eye-opening, inspiring experience, just talking to the borrowers and seeing the change that was happening directly. Though at the time it was really challenging to get a role at Kiva. They weren't always hiring, and people didn't want to leave the organization, so there wasn't, a lot of job openings or opportunities. So yeah, I went to Indiegogo. I did try other things, but I did reach a point in my career at Indiegogo again where I was doing the partnership marketing program for hardware entrepreneurs, and I kind of had to realign with my values and think about what I had set out to do initially, which was to work in social impact and to leverage technology for social change and systemic change. And I actually went to a career coach who kind of guided me through all these different exercises about values and strengths and weaknesses. And she had me draft my dream job description based off of things that I wanted to do and also experiences that I felt were really formative and that I wanted to continue with. And a week after I drafted that job description, the role at Kiva that I would eventually get opened up, and they almost matched each other perfectly.
Wow.
Which I wrote in my cover letter. That the first sentence I said, last week I drafted my dream job description, and this week it was posted on your career page.
Wow.
So it just felt very serendipitous timing, really.
Yeah. Yeah, no, that's really incredible to hear. And it's always exciting when people can, do what they love and do what they're passionate about. And, it looks like you've had a few different roles at Kiva over these years, and maybe talk about that progression. And then, I know you mentioned it earlier, but spend a little more time on your current role.
Yeah, so I entered Kiva as an account manager for their partnership program, which is the program I oversee now. And basically, corporations and foundations work with Kiva to lend money at scale, but they often have a goal of, creating the most impact possible and being able to promote it through their brand, or they have a goal of employee engagement or of customer engagement or cause marketing. And so as the account manager, my role was to help them implement these campaigns, whether it was employee engagement or cause marketing, troubleshoot, provide customer service, and help both the corporation achieve their goal, but also make sure it was driving impact for Kiva as an organization. And as the program grew and evolved, so did my role. So I stepped in after account management. My role just continued to expand, where I would start to utilize partner feedback and let our product team know about some of the feedback that partners were experiencing. I also would kind of leverage the data and analytics that we had on hand to figure out how to make different improvements within the program. Kiva is a very complicated, multifaceted organization. So I think I was the first person in the role when they hired. That role hadn't existed before. And once I joined, I could just see a lot of opportunity for growth and for things that we could change and develop as the program expanded. And so, yeah, I've been at Kiva now about 4.5 years. And what we're finding, and this might be bearing the lead on a few of your other questions, but what we're finding is the landscape of corporate philanthropy has changed a lot. And what that means is employees, people, customers, millennials, Gen Zers, all groups of people are kind of demanding more from the places they work and from the companies, the companies that they buy products from. We are expecting corporations to, do better and how they serve the world through their purpose, through their global footprint, and through the communities that they're affecting. And so there's a lot more um, pressure for better actually being put on these corporations to really evaluate the impact they're having on the world. And as that has been happening on a macro level, Kiva has been positioned well to help guide corporations through that change of really figuring out what their purpose is and how they can tie employees to that purpose through the lens of social impact. So what that means tangibly is, for example, we partner with Visa. Visa is, at its the most basic level, a credit card processing company. But their purpose is to help small and medium businesses thrive. They really want to provide access to small and medium businesses to help them grow and expand. And they partner with Kiva to tie their employees to that mission. So now every employee at Visa can lend to a small business on Kiva every employee at Visa can lend to a small business on Kiva and really feel that they are actively participating in that purpose. So that's kind of how our program has grown based off of just the changes that's happening within corporate philanthropy. And now my role currently, I'm the director of this program, and I'm thinking both short term and long term how we can take in even more partners and help them both achieve their goals, but make an impact at scale. Kiva is focused on a few different impact areas. We work with access to finance for women, for refugees, smallholder farmers, marginalized communities. And so I'm really thinking about like the tools and products and services that we can offer corporations to help them drive impact to those areas and those groups through Kiva.
Yeah, that's amazing. And to think of the engagement opportunity that Kiva is able to provide for the employees of these corporations, and not just have a company saying, yeah, we write a big check or checks to these various organizations. Like, no, we're going through this incredible platform, and our employees actually get engaged in the process and see the help that the dollars that they're directing and where it's going. And I think that's a really cool thing to be able to offer.
Yeah, when I first heard of it, this program actually, when I was an intern, they launched a Matter to a Million program with HP, where 250,000 HP employees globally got a $25 credit to lend on Kiva. And that was kind of the biggest pivotal corporate program that Kiva had launched. And you really realize how mutually beneficial it is for all parties involved, a program like this, because corporations get the upfront tax deduction. They can then deposit this money into an account and engage their employees who can all lend it out to borrowers. Those borrowers repay the loans. Repayments start coming in within 30 days. Goes back to HP's account. They can use that same dollar year over year to run these programs. They don't have to add any additional money into it. And so what we're seeing is an upfront investment of, say, $1 million ends up having $3 million in impact, and you've engaged your global workforce, and you've gotten a tax deduction. So it's one of those partnership models that just feels really good and really scalable and just really mutually beneficial to everyone involved.
That's really incredible to be able to do it at that scale with an organization like them. And you mentioned that, obviously their loans, they get repaid. Is that always the expectation with these? Are there instances where the borrower can't repay the loans?
Yes. So the model is microfinance lending. So it is Kiva works really hard with to achieve our 96% repayment rate, which, as you can imagine, we're really proud of, because the borrowers on the platform are individuals who have been locked out of traditional financial systems. Banks have deemed them unbankable or not credit worthy. And so we're really trying to access what we call the bottom rung of the the capital ladder. So yeah, again, individuals who might not have collateral or have no history of lending. And we've been able to prove that they can pay back at 96% repayment rate. But that doesn't happen in a vacuum or a silo. So we work with our lending partners. There are 300 organizations they usually have a social impact lens. And these partners provide um, essential services to these borrowers to make sure that they're set up for success, because we don't want people to get stuck in default or delinquency rates, or have to turn to loan sharks. So they provide wraparound services like financial literacy classes, bookkeeping, different training sessions to these borrowers to make sure that they're able to pay back. And additionally, we also offer flexible loan terms. So there's a lot of examples we can provide around why flexible lending is so important. Everything from, if you can imagine a farmer who takes out a loan for seeds for their crop, they can't pay that loan back until their crop grows and they're able to sell the crop and get the earnings from that. So having loan terms that are not, rigid, but are flexible based off the needs of the borrowers allows people to pay back at that rate. And to answer, that was a long journey to get to your answer, but the answer is corporations see that repayment rate as a way to measure how impactful the programs that we have are. And also they understand too the idea of flexible lending and loan terms, especially during COVID. As you can imagine, when businesses had to shut down, our lending partners had to close their offices, we had to implement grace periods and really make sure that our borrowers were set up for success.
Yeah, that must have been a really difficult time, especially, I mean, obviously it was for everyone, but especially when you're lending money to businesses that are now suddenly all in flux.
It was an incredibly turbulent time to understand how COVID was impacting countries so differently, and the different support that our borrowers and lending partners had depending on the country. So Kiva implemented what we call crisis support loans, which were direct infusion of cash to our lending partners. These are organizations that are truly the backbone of these local economies. They're the ones that issue the loans, are able to provide services to the borrowers. So we could see that if they had to shut down permanently due to COVID, the entire system that we had built would not be able to continue. So the crisis support loans were up to $500,000 and a direct infusion of 0% loan to these organizations. Additionally, we also scaled up in the US as we saw small businesses suffered a lot in the US alone. And so we were able to not only increase the size of our loans within the US, but also offer grace periods to those small businesses.
So the loans that you gave to the partner organizations that are supporting the borrowers, where did those dollars come from? Did those come from donors on your side? Does Kiva have money in reserve?
They were crowdfunded loans. So we posted them on the site, and our lenders and our corporate partners and foundations supported those crisis support loans. We also launched a COVID response fund. One of the earliest partners to that fund was Hitachi. They provided $1 million lending grant that would allow us to get money out into the borrowers and the lending partners during COVID as quickly as possible. So we worked both with our lenders and our corporate partners and our foundations to communicate the urgency of getting money and capital into these areas. And then our impact investments team worked with our lending partners and borrowers to ensure that they were getting everything they needed, especially in those early days of COVID when there were shutdowns everywhere and everything was so chaotic. We had to move really quickly.
You've talked about your incredible corporate partners, and you obviously have consumers that are going on the platform and becoming lenders. What portion of your lenders are corporate versus consumer?
That's a great question that, like most things at Kiva, doesn't have a simple answer. So we know that 30 to 40% of our lenders have gone through some kind of corporate program. We don't know if they have gone through an employee engagement program or if it was a customer engagement or some kind of stakeholder initiative. So we haven't yet been able to do that kind of analysis, but we know, that 30 to 40% of our lenders have participated in some kind of corporate program. And as it stands now, we have about 130 corporate and foundational partners as well. excuse me, as well.
Yeah, that's incredible. And I love how you guys are able to drive engagement. Outside of the corporate partnerships, how do you drive people to your website and, to become lenders?
Awareness building is really important. So in the early days of Kiva, we got named by Oprah as one of her favorite things, and that crashed our website. That was kind of that in the Frontline. We were featured in Frontline, which was the pride and joy of Kiva, and how we got a lot of awareness and built traction. And now we have an amazing PR and comms team who really works to elevate the stories of impact. So we want to center the voices of the borrower, their businesses, and really have people understand what Kiva does and how easy it is for you to make a difference and to really support individuals around the world. So the PR and comms, the media outlets help a lot. And then word of mouth, even with our corporate partners, we find once you try Kiva once, you kind of want to share it with people. Because again, it's like you were saying, instead of just giving $25 to a nonprofit and not seeing where it goes, you lend $25 to a refugee, you get that money paid back, you can lend it again to a social enterprise or a solar company. So it becomes quite addictive. And we find lenders are bringing other lenders onto the platform. And similarly with corporate partners, if someone works at a corporate company that we've worked with, for example, our contact at Visa used to work at Pepsi, and then she moved over to Visa and brought the Kiva program with her. And so it's really these kind of brand ambassadors and enthusiasts that help spread the word about Kiva and bring new lenders onto our platform. And the last thing I'll say is, like every technology platform, we are struggling in the attention economy. There's a lot of companies vying for individuals' attention and spend, and Kiva struggles with that. As a nonprofit, we're limited on how much money we have to market our platform. So we do, we do struggle with bringing in newer audiences. We've leaned on partners in the past to help with that. So PayPal, for example, ran a consumer lending campaign every year called Small Loans, Big Impact, where they would email 60 million people. Basically, if you used PayPal during these years, you probably got an email about this, where they would say the first 10,000 people to support a small business on Kiva will receive an additional credit from PayPal to lend to another entrepreneur. And they would literally provide money to their consumers to bring them onto our platform.
Wow, that's awesome. It's great to hear about great partnerships like that. And, you mentioned earlier how proud you guys are of the 96% repayment rate, which I think is incredible. And it had me wondering, if there are other ways that you measure impact besides that rate and besides the total dollar amount lent.
We do. We have an entire impact scorecard that essentially evaluates different levels of impact to different, I mentioned earlier, the vulnerable groups. So is this a marginalized group? Is this, does this help promote gender equity? So that we have different impact frameworks and scorecards that our impact team has built and has rolled out to our lending partners. Additionally, we also seek out lending partners who have loan products that apply to those impact frameworks. Another one is sustainability. So are they creating loan products that help with climate change mitigation or resiliency? There's an entire framework of impact that they evaluate through. And what we find too, what's so fascinating about Kiva, it's kind of a blend of all these worlds of very heady impact people, and then there's also the financial employees, and then there's the technology employees, and it's kind of this fusion. The organization is a fusion of all these different industries, figuring out which pieces of information to digest and promote to different groups is really challenging. So we find if we go really deep in the impact work to some of our lenders, their eyes kind of gloss over. But similarly, foundations, for example, want to know exactly how we're measuring impact in the outcome data from borrowers.
Sounds like you guys, really have this system dialed in, and it's really cool to hear about. And I meant to ask earlier, When did Kiva start?
Started in 2005. I actually just gave a presentation on the history of Kiva, but our co-founders were working for another organization called, I think, Village Enterprise in Uganda. And the kind of founding story was a shopkeeper was selling these SIM cards, but he would run out every week. And they kind of asked, like, why don't you just buy more inventory? Seems simple. He was like, I don't have the cash to increase my inventory. I only have enough cash on hand to buy what I have available. And that kind of got their mind churning around just the idea of access to capital and how different it is depending on the group that you identify with or the country that you live in. And so they returned back to the Bay Area and collaborated with our other co-founder, who was one of the initial founders of PayPal. So we have a very long-standing entrenched history with PayPal as an organization because one of our co-founders also co-founded PayPal. And then from there, our platform kind of grew, and we're one of the only nonprofits that PayPal offers free payment processing through, which is very unique and has allowed us to effectively raise more money and get that out into the borrowers' hands without having to pay, payment processing fees. And so we're actually coming up to our 2 billion milestone in a few months, where Kiva, we've been around since 2005, but we've lent almost $2 billion, which is truly insane if you think about the fact that these loans are an average of $400.
Yeah, I mean, that's really incredible. And it really shows the tremendous impact that the organization is making. And, $400, that's incredible, the kind of impact that can have. And like you were saying, a lot of these are $25 donations loans. Like, people are giving $25 to these, and yet they have such incredible impact. Can you talk about a little bit some of the impact that these, despite them being small dollar amounts, can have on the communities they go to, and perhaps some specific examples?
Just generally, access to finance helps improve people's livelihood and their outcomes for the future. But tangibly, especially when we look at the populations we're serving, they have been locked out of that financial access altogether. So women, 86% of our borrowers are women. Studies have shown that for every dollar you invest in a woman, she invests 80 cents back into her community. And we see that firsthand with the stories of borrowers. So I met a borrower in Zimbabwe who was taking out a loan to build a chicken coop. When I was in Zimbabwe at the time, the recession had happened and a lot of men had been laid off from their jobs. And that created a resurgence of entrepreneurship within that country, where women really saw that they had to pay for their children's school fees and they needed to find a way to pay for those fees. So they got very entrepreneurial. This borrower specifically decided to try to become a poultry farmer. She took out a Kiva loan for a caged chicken coop and started selling her chickens locally. When I met her, she was paying back her third loan, and she was the largest poultry farmer in her region. And so she had also been able to, unfortunately, a lot of children in sub-Saharan Africa have been orphaned from HIV. She had adopted one of the orphan children and brought them into her family, so that you can really see the positive effects of not just access to capital, but how it helps with economic mobility and just lifting communities out of poverty overall. And there are so many other stories like that. When it comes to refugee financing, for example, a lot of organizations did not want to lend to refugees. They saw them as a flight risk. They said it was too risky, that refugees, were a flight risk and are unlikely to pay back. Kiva really was at the forefront of showing that not only is access to capital critical for refugees and resettling in these countries and starting a life and starting to invest back into the communities that they're in, but we were able to show that they pay back at higher repayment rates than our average borrower. And through that, we've been able to produce a lot of thought leadership that has opened other access to financing at larger levels from other institutions. So it's not just Kiva and the $400 loans, it's what value that can show for, again, the capital access ladder at scale, and why investing in these communities is so important.
Yeah, it's inspiring to hear about, and I hope that there's people listening that maybe weren't familiar with Kiva before that can now go on and become a lender and see how far their dollars truly can go, whether that's actually going towards building a business or whether it's opening doors, whatever that may be. And I think that Kiva is setting a really great example for how organizations can run.
Yeah, and I would add that whatever you're interested in, if it's solar panels, or if it's smallholder farmers, or if you've traveled to a country recently that moved you in a way or made you want to learn more about that country and that culture, definitely encourage people to go on the site and shop around on the filters. There's so many different types of borrowers, entrepreneurs, social enterprises. There's a solar company in Ghana that is, trying to eliminate the cook stoves that can create a lot of smog and pollution by implementing solar cooking options. And it's a great way to just learn about not only the businesses, but the different types of problems these communities are trying to solve. And we this year partnered with TripAdvisor actually to provide lending credits to the TripAdvisor community so that they could invest back into the countries that they had just traveled to.
Yeah, that's really interesting, and the perspective that it can add for people in terms of the problems in the world, and perhaps even spark ideas to help solve those problems beyond the loans. And it actually reminds me of an idea that I've certainly mentioned on an episode or two, but right now I have a 2.5-year-old, another one on the way. And when our kids are older, though, I hope that when we go on vacations that we can spend a portion of the vacation learning about the struggles of the local community and getting hands-on and helping. And, it seems like what you see on Kiva could potentially inspire some of those experiences and vice versa. So it's certainly something that I'll keep in mind. And I also really like the idea that just popped into my head. I'm Jewish, so when we're celebrating Hanukkah, I always have thought I want to incorporate some sort of social impact element into Hanukkah. And I like the idea of perhaps, maybe our kids get $25 each of the 8 nights to, pick a different loan or something of that nature.
I love that idea. And we also tell people that you can just if for any occasion that you're going to gift someone money, get them a Kiva card. They have to lend that first, but then the repayments come back and they can withdraw the money. So if you give someone just make sure that money goes through something good first before they go, shop on Amazon or something. Give them a Kiva card. They have to lend it out, and then they can withdraw the money from their Kiva account and use it and spend it elsewhere. But having that money cycle through someone else's hands is really valuable.
Wow. I love that. And, anyone in the future that receives a Kiva gift card from me, know that this was the origin, because I love that idea. And, love the idea that the gifts are going to actually do work on helping people beyond, the person you're giving the gift to. So thank you for sharing that.
Absolutely.
And, I'll make sure to include all the various links to your platform and et cetera in the show notes. But, in this sort of round at Kiva, you've been there almost 5 years. How do you feel that, you've changed as well as your viewpoint on the global financial landscape?
Specifically on the program I'm running, we're thinking now, I'm helping to run. We're thinking now about not only can we help corporations on their individual campaign level, but how can we create a product that corporations and people like us can leverage to achieve the change that they want to achieve, so that we're not just doing these one-off initiatives, but really creating a growth loop that allows it to expand and grow, so you can bring on more people to help the farmers that you want to help, and corporations can really leverage the technology we have to achieve change at scale. That's like not a simple solution that's a really meaty problem that we're trying to figure out, is really providing the framework and the technology for people to do the good that they want to do in the world. And in terms of the financial global landscape, I mean, understanding the after effects of what COVID has kind of wreaked on our communities is around ensuring that we're setting up these communities for long-term success, and additionally making sure that they're able to face future hardships with resiliency, especially as it relates to, as we all know, climate change is going to have a large scale effect not only on our livelihoods but on small businesses and their ability to deal with that hardship and deal with that long-term resiliency. So that's kind of, things that Kiva is thinking through and how that affects the managed lending program, the corporate lending program, is around how do we communicate the work that Kiva is doing on the ground to set our borrowers up for long-term success in a way that inspires and motivates corporations to add more money and to continue to bring in their employees and customers into our mission and get everyone excited and galvanized around the work that we're doing, and also to motivate, at the risk of sounding like a total idealist, I think, thinking about how we can just motivate the general public and make people feel hopeful and inspired for a better future. Because I think that it's really easy to feel pessimistic, and that as an individual, it's really hard to affect change. So that's our job, as corporations, as nonprofits, and as governments, is to create frameworks and systems that allow individuals to be able to affect change at their level and meet them where they're at.
Yeah, I really like that concept of creating the tools and the platform necessary to allow individuals to create true impact on their own. I think that that's powerful, and also, like you were saying, it can be kind of a pessimistic society in some ways these days, and being able to provide some light and show the good that can be done, and all the great things that are happening in our world can be so powerful right now.
Yeah, I totally agree.
So throughout your career, has there been anyone in particular that you've considered a mentor?
I have had a lot of mentors in my career. I've been really fortunate to work alongside a ton of really brilliant people who bring a diversity of thought and opinion and background. So, at the risk of leaving anyone out, I'm not going to name any individual specifically, but I will say, we talked about my early career being in the technology space, and having strong female mentors and women in leadership has been critical to me understanding my career and the pathways that I can forge for myself. So I have been very fortunate currently and in previous roles to have really strong women leaders who have helped guide me and through some pretty male dominated spaces.
Appreciate you sharing that. Certainly important. I, can only imagine the struggles of women in business in general, but especially in the technology space. So I'm really glad that you've had those people along the way. And so this is the point at which, if you'd like, you can ask me a question.
I'm curious, of all the people you interview, what do you find? What are some of the messages that you find most inspiring, and has it evolved and changed, over the course of the pandemic to today?
Yeah, that's a great question. I appreciate it. And one just where my brain immediately went is to this quote from Bishop Omar Jawar, who was just an incredibly impactful individual. Unfortunately, he passed during COVID, but his partner in the organization, Urban Specialist Anton Lucky, came on an episode, and he said, the quote from Bishop Omar, "Only inspired people inspire." And that's something that seems to ring true in so many of these interviews. And then, the same quote was brought up by a mutual acquaintance of theirs on a recent episode. And so that's one thing I've really taken away from this, is just not only what is the great work that these individuals are doing, but how they are clearly inspired in the work that they're doing, and how is that leading them to inspire others. And sometimes that's something they're aiming for to inspire others, but I find even more often that they don't even realize the level of inspiration that they've provided, and what that brings to the world beyond the specifics of their work.
That's amazing. I think having a medium like what you're doing with a podcast helps to kind of provide that inspiration and share out the messaging and the stories of the work that other people are doing, so that there's more awareness around, like you were saying, all the good work that individuals are doing. None of us are doing this alone, and having a podcast like this that elevates that is so important.
Well, thank you so much. I really appreciate that. It definitely aimed for this to be positive and to shine a light on people that are doing incredible work in the world that often don't, either don't allow the light to be shined on them, or they're too busy, doing their work to tell people about it. But I'm really glad to be able to provide a platform for that.
That's great.
So if everything ends tomorrow, interpret everything however you will, but everything's over, you're looking back on what you've accomplished, what is something that you are incredibly proud of?
I read this question and I was like, oh my gosh, I have no idea how to respond to that. I think that the work that I'm doing, it's really easy to get stuck in the weeds. And so stepping back and thinking about all the people who've contributed to that, and the connectivity that this program has had, and inspiring, like you were saying, individuals and also corporations to make a difference and to take a stance, and the individuals within the Kiva ecosystem, like the lenders, the borrowers, the employees at Kiva, having that kind of inspiration and connection point, and trying to steer it forward and continue to elevate the work that this program is doing is a huge source of pride for me. And it's something I care very much about, and is what has kept me at Kiva, the last almost 5 years, and what will continue to keep me at the organization, so that I can see this program grow and see how many people it can change.
Yeah, I mean, it's really awesome to see what you dedicate your life and time to, and sounds like Kiva's just creating a really incredible impact, and I'm excited to sort of get this story out there. I'm sure it's out there, but just to continue to expand its reach, and hopefully, help bring a few new users to the platform.
We would love to have them. Everyone is welcome, and there's something for everyone to support. So go check it out.
So there's one question, I've made sure to ask every single guest since episode 1, and it's this. If you could snap your fingers and fix one thing in the world, what would it be, and how do you think that change would reverberate?
There's no simple way to fix capitalism, but I would love for capitalism to provide equal opportunity to everyone, and to be able to, work in everyone's benefit equally, without having the poverty and the marginalized communities that we're seeing today. And that kind of ties back to the notion of shared liberation, that when we lift, one group out of poverty, when we dismantle the racist systems around us, we all benefit. And so I think that, eliminating the downfalls of capitalism and the negative effects of it can really lead to a lot more dignity and a lot more hope and optimism in the world in general. And that's an intentionally vague answer, because it's not an easy thing to do.
Yeah, no, that makes sense to me. And there's so many good things about capitalism, plenty of bad things, and if you could give people the right motivations for what they do, it would go a tremendously long way. And really appreciate all that you've shared with us today. And I think I at least know one of the answers to this, but how can people support you and your impact?
Spread the word, and of course, go to kiva.org. Choose a borrower, try lending. And the other thing I wanted to say is, don't be afraid to approach the workplaces that you're in, or the communities that you're in, with curiosity about how they can change, because we don't have to accept the systems that we're working in, or the issues that we have. There's a lot of change that can happen in the world, and it takes individuals questioning why things are the way they are to really affect that change. So my answer is twofold. It's to support Kiva, but also to approach life and problems with curiosity and questions.
Awesome. I really appreciate that. And I actually did have one more question come to mind that I'm going to ask real quick. So you mentioned, average loan, $400, have you guys, how high does that go? Like what's like the biggest loan that you guys do?
We just launched a social enterprise loan it was the solar company I was talking about. It's a refugee-owned solar company in Ghana, and their loan was for $300,000. So that's one of the largest loans we've ever posted.
Wow, it's really cool to hear sort of the variation in scale. And thanks for letting me throw in that final random question. But love the work that you guys are doing. Certainly going to send everybody to kiva.org. And, look forward to continuing to see as you guys progress your work at Kiva, and also to stay in touch and continue learning about your work.
Thank you so much for having me today. It's been such a great conversation.
Thanks for listening to this episode of People Are the Answer. To find out more, go to peoplearetheanswer.com.